Yeah,
You okay?
we're okay. Go.
Okay. Would you bow your head, please? Father God, we invite you into our midst today. We give you just honor and glory for not only the beautiful day, but for lives well lived. Not only Jim Hall, who we're going to talk about in a minute, of course, but his good friend Cecil Steele. Lord, may your arms of peace and final healing rest around these men. Lord, bless our ceremony today and just have us to renew our dedication not only to the good things on earth, but to your work in heaven as well, Lord. We ask it in your name. Amen. Okay, my name is Rich Wallace. I don't know all of you. I know most of you. I'm here as a volunteer on behalf of the Historical Society, and it's just a pleasure to welcome family, officials from the Society, and the veterans groups all around the area, and friends of Jim Hall and members of Jim Hall's family. Obviously, everybody's here because you know Jim, and we knew him and we loved him. But we're here to dedicate a park bench. And so in my crazy mind, I began to think, why a park bench? And is there something significant about a park bench which would tie into how we're going to remember Jim Hall? We're going to try to tackle that question in just a minute, okay? So at the Historical Society, the historians there always look into the past, and for a couple reasons. We look to see who were the difference makers in our community from time to time, beginning with the 1820s to the present time, and what are the lessons of history that we can take and apply to our present time. And if you look at the canal era, for example, the canal feeder really got Sidney started on its history. That was Dr. William Fielding. This was a railroad town since 1853. That was Hugh Thompson. So in looking at our history, we found out that at every critical juncture in history, there were visionaries, there were people who were leaving legacies who stepped forward. So that's what history gives us. History gives us that information. But really now we need to look at the present time, and that is, do difference makers and legacy makers only exist in the past, or are we presently making difference makers and legacy makers in our community now? And the answer to that question has to be yes. We can't only rely on those great visionaries of the past. We have to rely on current people or people who have recently passed to look at that issue. So back to the park bench for a minute. Why a park bench? You see the park bench back there? We'll unveil it in just a minute. There's no smartphone attachment to it. There's no slide. There's no dispenser of pop or any other liquid. When you sit on a park bench, what do? You sit, you reflect, and you not only thank God for his mercies, but you reflect on things around you. It's you and the park bench. That bench has Jim Hall's name on it. So then the question becomes, what did Jim Hall do for us in terms of legacy? And I want to talk about just a couple or three things during his life. We could be here for a couple of hours to describe all Jim did. I knew him really well. I probably couldn't recall or didn't ever know of 10% of the difference that he made in this community. But let's look at a few things. Jim was a Ferguson construction superintendent for 38 years. Jim had a lot of honestly earned pride in, for example, the Bensar buildings. But for him to be able to go around town and look at those buildings and know that he helped, as a superintendent, change the landscape of Sidney was important to Jim. There was a tangible legacy that he left. People that are not in construction maybe don't have the opportunity to do that, but Jim did that, and that was part of his legacy. How many of you knew Jim and his work at Wilson Memorial Hospital, now Wilson Health? How many of you went in and saw Jim at the desk? Did you ever go in and have Jim Hall not engage you, not smile, not welcome you? I went in the hospital yesterday, and there was a lady there, and I'm sure she was nice, but she was looking at the desk, and I didn't get the interaction. When I went in and Jim Hall was there, Jim Hall made sure that he knew I was welcome. Jim engaged in compassion and kindness. Now, I think anybody who was a volunteer at the hospital will know that's the legacy he left as a Wilson Health volunteer. He wasn't there to put in his time. He was there to make a difference in everybody who walked through that door. I know I tried to schedule meetings with him, and he would say, well, no, I've got my shift out at the hospital, I'm volunteer guest out there. I'm working the front desk, and I would say, well, or at least I would think. I never really told him that I needed to have him cancel that, but it was very firm in his mind that that's one thing on the schedule that you didn't mess with. That was one of his duties to the community. So you've got his legacy as a superintendent of Ferguson. You've got his legacy at the hospital. He was a long-time volunteer and historian at the Shelby County Historical Society. Jim kept pushing us to do the proper programs for veterans, to research the World War I story, to research the POW stories. And that was an incessant theme that we always heard from him. And so, at least during my life, however long that lasts, Jim will always be a legacy to me and an inspiration to me, because he pounded home the theme of never forget the veterans and their sacrifice. He was always pushing me, let's come up with another program for the veterans, let's do something else for the veterans, and he made a huge difference. And then let's get to what you probably all know the best about him, and that's his overall service to veterans. How many veterans do we have here? Okay. Have you ever really seen or talked to Jim Hall that he didn't bring up your service or the need to honor veterans? He lived that. That was his DNA. Jim wanted me to go on the Vets to DC trip, and so I wore this shirt today in honor of Jim. I went on 2 of those trips, and I said, wow, Jim, those were good. And they were great. They were great. I went on 2, and then Jim went on 9 more. Jim took 11 trips to DC. Not for his glory. He didn't get paid to do it. He knew that if he spent 3 or 4 days, he might meet one other veteran to whom he could express his gratitude. Jim was in the Air Force, never saw combat, but he loved the stories of the heroic battlefield exploits and the average GI that maybe even never saw a battle. He loved veterans' activities. And so, again, we could talk for half an hour about that, but that was a tremendous legacy that he left. And we're now in Tawawa Park. This was also a passion area for Jim. He loved this park. He walked this park. And when he got to know the park, he decided that a concentration area for him ought to be the history of the park. So he learned the history of the park. He gave tours. He talked about the park. Every area he touched, he made that part of his passion. He made that part of his legacy. So let's go back to the bench. The bench has Jim Hall's name on it. Every time you walk through that opening and walk past this park bench, I want you to stop, look at that bench. If you have a minute, I want you to sit on the bench. And when you sit on the bench, I want you to do 2 things, because Jim would want you to do these 2 things. First of all, I want you to think of the legacy that he left intentionally for you, to inspire you. And then secondly, I want you to answer the question, what legacy am I leaving? What legacy are you leaving? That's Jim Hall's real legacy. He was a man of integrity, honor, and service, and it's a great honor of mine and for the Historical Society to be here and dedicate that bench to Jim Hall. Tilda? That's it. So what do you want to do next?
Brenda's going to uncover. She knows.
Okay.
that's the end. That's the end of our service today. But if you want to notice, this morning when we got here and we covered the bench, somebody had placed a butterfly on the bench. So if you saw when Brenda picked up the covering, she reached down to find the butterfly that I told her was underneath the cloth, and she should find it before she lost it. So if you want to come up and sit on the bench, we welcome you, and Jim would want you to come and rest.
How's the rain? How's the morning? Right now. I would say
Yeah, even it hit me in the mornings the last couple of weeks, so yeah.
Yes. I've met you before, but it's been a while. Yes, I've met you many times before, but it's been a while. I just wanted to come say hi to you. It's good to see you.
It's like a great
Where you want to meet?
You've been going to say either deal with it or deal with it.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Well, that's service.
With a smile.